Good morning and welcome to Mental Health Matters. It's me, Dr. Audrey Tang, and my co-host is Judith Crosier. Today we have a number of very special interviews to share with you. Our topic is lived experience and the importance of hearing people's voices. The only thing with lived experience is that whilst it gives you very rich information, it's often something that people will connect with and will resonate with, it's not always you're not always able to generalize from it. If you only get one story, although you get the very, very rich story and you get that person's personal experience, it's important for resonating with it and feeling that you're not alone. But where it can be problematic is if you start trying to transfer this to the general population. Not everyone will have that experience in exactly the same way. And so whilst, and this is true for anybody who's out there in the influencing sphere, especially when it comes to well-being, whilst it can be really helpful to share your personal story, and we do this on the show a lot, we hear our guests' personal stories, and there will be themes that come out of that that are more generalizable because more guests have actually said that, so you think like a scientist. Remember that they are individual personal stories. Not everyone's journey is exactly the same. We can learn a lot from that individual because the data is so rich and so important. It's like case study data, but be very mindful when it comes to being able to generalize and transfer across and make broad brush statements from that data, because that doesn't always help. We're going to start actually out in the community. I was invited to a wonderful art installation, and this was about sharing the stories of migrants who have been crossing the channel and the many migrants who have sadly lost their lives.
We are the town centre church in Bedford, so we have a ministry to the local area that people live in and around the town centre. But also because we're in the centre of the county town, this church does have a big civic role across the county, so we tend to have civic events, services for the mayor, for the High Sheriff, for the Lord Lieutenant and so on. The exterior of the church is sort of late medieval. The interior was restored and enhanced a lot during the Victorian era, so during the 19th century. So most of what you can see on the inside is probably Victorian, although there are some older elements as well. During the Second World War, the BBC broadcast a daily service from somewhere in England, our Trinity Chapel. So the Christian message was being broadcast across the world from this side chapel at St Paul's Church. And for me, there is something about that Christian message of hope being broadcast from the place that we're having this exhibition to honour those refugees who've lost their lives. Bottle tops here. Inside each bottle top is a tiny origami boat, and the artist is trying to combine the mundane of the discarded bottle tops with the extraordinary journeys that these people set off on. These bottle tops sadly represent the 2011 people who lost their lives crossing the Mediterranean last year trying to get to Europe. So each one of the boats has got names, generally generic names, so father, mother, sister, friend, brother. The large boat in the centre was given to the artist by someone who lost members of her close family and her goddaughter in an air raid shelter in Syria, which was bombed. actually something from someone who lost someone close to them. The artist promised her that she would keep it in every exhibition, every artwork that she created, that would feature to honour those lives lost. I think it's important. As a Christian, I believe that Jesus teaches us to love our neighbour. I just had 50 kids in from Bedford Modern School this morning, and I was talking to them about the exhibition. And really, if we're to love our neighbour, Jesus tells us that even those that we don't necessarily recognise are our neighbour, and there is something about those refugees being so much in need and feeling so rejected by their own countries, but unfortunately to where they're going. Ordinary people making extraordinary journeys, extraordinary bravery, and the tragic ends for some of them. I think it's really important that the Civic Church in Bedford gets involved to show that actually it is something that we hold dear, is something dear to our hearts, to say that this is something we think the world needs to care about.
Welcome back to Mental Health Matters. On today's show, we've been talking about lived experience, and my next guest is Sam Mitchell. He is the host of Autism Rocks and Rolls, and he himself has been going around. He's got 18,000 plus downloads already for his podcast, and he's been going around really advocating for those with autism, really showing people, and in his words, that someone with autism does not need to get fixed. And I had the pleasure of interviewing him. This one is a recorded interview because of the time difference. He was up, bless him, at 3 a.m. to take this call. But let's go over and hear all about Autism Rocks and Rolls and the amazing work that Sam's doing. Sam, thank you so much for joining me. Please tell me about your podcast, Autism Rocks and Rolls, and why you set it up.
All right, so yes, I'm going to introduce myself first. Hello, everyone. My name is Sam Mitchell, and I run the podcast, Autism Rocks and Rolls. It's a podcast about autism and how we cope with daily struggles that you may or may not understand. Through the podcast, it's grown so much. I developed sponsors, a board of 8. I also do speaking engagements. I've spoken in Oklahoma, Orlando 3 times, Canada twice, Stuart, Florida, and Washington, D.C., but I also am an event planner in the United States, mainly in Indiana, which is where I'm from. And then I started the podcast because I fell in love with it after I joined my high school's media club, and I didn't want to wait till college to expand my media skills, so that's when I made Autism Rocks and Rolls.
That's brilliant. I love the innovation. I like the fact that you noticed a niche area which you do need to fill, because what do people still misunderstand about autism?
We can't do anything. We're not capable of understanding nothing when we could literally be the smartest person in the room.
Yeah, fully agree. What changes do you therefore hope your podcast will bring about when you tackle these topics?
The changes I hope it brings is there's more of an understanding, there's more of a grasp of autism. I mean, as I made this podcast, I saw more people getting diagnosed, as well as part of the reason why I also started. It was from 1 in 44 to 1 in 36 to now, I believe, 1 in 33. And it's just going to keep increasing.
And there's different ways that autism presents. Do you mind telling me a little bit about that, please?
Yep. So there is a spectrum of autism. A lot of people say the terms low functioning, middle functioning, high functioning. Now, for me, in my view, as much as we need to be realistic, I prefer not to say functioning because you're dimming their abilities. So I always say mindset of. So maybe, for example, this person who has diagnosed with, and I'm air quoting it, low functioning, has the mindset of a 3-year-old.
Mm.
The middle side, I always say the mindset of maybe a 10-year-old. For me, I would say realistically, biologically, I'm 21, but mentally, I'm probably 19.
Yeah, I see. That's a really good way of looking at that. And because age gives you almost that spectrum to consider, it's almost easier for people to understand that better. I really like that definition. And I love the title of your TED Talks. You're a TED Talker as well, Controlling Chaos with Structure. What tips can you give us that help you, but also could help us? Because when you're working with neurodivergence, what we tend to find is when you make it right for the person with a neurodivergence, you make it right for everybody because everybody can benefit from those changes.
Right. Well, I think people need to understand in our livelihood, we need structure in everything we do. Even the most chaotic thing out there, such as, okay, this is a kind of a funny example. This is what I use in my TED Talk. I went more in depth with this topic, the pinball. As much as chaotic as it is, it's very controlled. In my view, the ball's not flying out of the glass. That's a great analogy to put in my opinion. The ball can't fly out of the glass. Even if it's the most chaotic, parade going on, it cannot break the glass. And the parades typically don't break the glass because they're going down the streets. They're not going on the grass.
Yes, that makes sense. What do you use to create structure for yourself? And I love that metaphor. I love it. But do you have any particular tips and tools that you use?
I would say for my structure, I probably use definitely some schedules in my life to help out. And
Mhm.
then I also say, if needed, I just have to walk away from the environment.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, again, that's something we can learn as well, because sometimes carrying on in that environment, it just gets overwhelming and overly emotional. And that's when people say things that they regret. But you are also a pioneer of better understanding neurodivergence. What one thing would you like us to do after hearing you speak that can be of benefit to someone who is neurodivergent, maybe to help us understand better, to communicate better, to interact better?
Don't look at us as if we're just pretty much garbage, one. Or two, don't look at us as we're, I don't want to say nothing, but fragile is a great word.
That's
Or
a great word. Yeah.
I would say something as if we're morbid. And I say morbid because I'm not saying autism isn't a death sentence. We firmly do agree with that belief, but don't look at us as if um, you're going to underestimate us because
Yes.
we're going to prove you wrong. Let me tell you, a lot of
Yes.
people in this world with autism have proven a lot of people wrong. Think of one
Yes.
example off the top of my head. Armani Williams, the first NASCAR driver to be open with autism as a toy. Apparently, you're a toy when you're growing up. As a child, you you play with Matchbox cars. Well, today he's winning races and only going in first, second, and third place. People are forgetting to tap into our skills. People look at what we can't do versus what we can do. That needs to be changed.
Yes. Yes. I love your point about don't look at somebody who's got autism as if they're fragile. That is such a powerful statement to make. I love that. It's been really eye-opening speaking with you. Thank you so much for your time, Sam. Where can we find you? Where can we listen to your podcast?
So you can find me on your favorite media platform. I'm not a hard guy to find. Um, I'm on Podbean, Spotify, YouTube. If you research me in your search engine optimization, something will pop up. But don't type in my name. Type in Autism Rocks and Rolls.
Welcome back to Mental Health Matters. I hope you've really enjoyed and thought about everything that Sam had to say in that interview, because a radio show, a podcast, shows like this are really great opportunities to raise people's voices. And this is something our next guest knows a lot about. Now, if you watch our sister show, Skits and Quibbles, we often have a guest on there who is an author, and they share extracts of their book. And also we interview them and find out a lot about how their process works, how we can write better, and so on. And that person is the winner and the recipient of the Firebird Book Award Judges Pick. And that's a competition run for authors by Speak Up Talk Radio in Ohio. Now, I am really, really pleased to have had the opportunity to interview Pat Rullo, who is the founder of Speak Up Talk Radio. And again, the lived experience is so important, because she will tell me all about how she founded the radio station and then how she went on to found the Firebird Book Award prizes and the podcast awards as well, the Positive Podcast Awards. Because once again, it was so important not only to give people and encourage people to raise their own voices, because Pat started off in hospital radio, but to then celebrate people raising their voices and hearing the lived experience, because sometimes that's so much more powerful just to connect with you and have something where you know you're not alone. So let's go over to Pat.
My mom fell at work and hurt her shoulder and supposedly had to have a total reverse shoulder replacement that went wrong. She was having a heart attack probably during surgery, but post-surgery for 9 hours that went undiagnosed. They kept taking EKGs that said heart attack in progress, but nobody did anything about it for 9 hours. So the next morning, a doctor who I didn't know found me in the waiting room, pulled me by the arm, took me into a small conference room. He handed me a manila envelope and he said, "This stinks and you need to do something about it." So with great trepidation, I opened up this envelope, not knowing what to expect. And inside were these 4 EKG rhythm strips, which I looked at, and I'm not a doctor, so I had no idea what it meant until I really looked at it. And across the top in plain English at 1 o'clock, 2:30, 3:40, 4 o'clock, it said, "Acute myocardial infarction in progress." So I knew right then what happened. Nobody ever spoke to me about what happened. She remained in the hospital for 4 months. I knew what happened. No one knew that I knew. So it allowed me to almost have a bird's eye view, that I could watch people and ask questions and get answers. And, I felt like a spy wearing sunglasses at night. I was able to see and find out what was going on. And I knew then I was never going to leave her side. So I pretty much stayed around the clock with her, just like a ninja warrior, fighting off all kinds of untoward events that happened. So it was like a baptism of fire. That's why I am so passionate about what I do, because if that happened to her, it's happening to other people. I think most of us were raised to be polite humans. It's not in our makeup, I don't think, to challenge people, unless we happen to be an aggressive person, but most people aren't. And then you put people into a healthcare or a hospital situation, and then that's even heightened, because then people have maybe an unfounded respect. And I don't mean to be rude. We need to respect everyone, but there is a level of respect that goes beyond, well, the doctor knows, I don't know anything. He or she is smarter than me. Who am I to ask? And so we then become little children, looking at these physicians as our, mother and father, figures of authority, and we shrink smaller and smaller. So you put all of that together, and we lose our ability to speak up. I've done speaking events all over the country, and I hear that all the time. I'd like to speak up. I would like to be an advocate for my spouse, but what happens when I'm not there? They're going to treat him or her worse than they did because they're taking it out on me. I would hope, and that's my answer, I would hope that that would not be the case, that healthcare people just believe and understand that the family is concerned, and maybe they don't have all of the information, and maybe they are speaking out of turn, but I don't think that they're going to be treated worse off because somebody else spoke up. I hope. You know, my mother always told me growing up that you catch more flies with honey. And so you can go that route up to a certain point, but then if you've got a particularly pesky fly, you got to pull out the fly swatter, you know. Sometimes you just have to do that. And we're not talking about, oh, a painter came over and didn't paint the wall the way I wanted it, or the landscaper didn't cut the grass or trim the bushes the way I wanted it. We're talking about a life and death situation. So keep that in mind, that perhaps if you don't speak up, the person you're caring for, and it might be yourself, you may die. I mean, just to be very blunt about it. And so you do, in that situation, have to pull every bit of muster that you have. And I also think we need to think about, maybe even ahead of time, how to frame our conversations. That it's always important to be respectful and to be polite. I know, killing more flies with honey, that actually works. There were so many times that speaking to healthcare providers, I would ask them, could you please help me? Can you please help me and my mom? Who's going to say no to that, you know? Or when they're finished helping, to say, thank you. Thank you for helping me. Thank you for helping my mom today. I really appreciate you. And to then try to start to build relationships, just little tiny mini relationships. So when that nurse comes in every day, smile and say, how was your evening last night? And if they say, oh, I took my son to ball game, the next day they come in, how was the ball game? So I think in speaking with our healthcare providers, we need to realize that they are human too, and they appreciate and are quite shocked when patients and family members actually communicate with them as if they are human too. So that when it's time to, I always say, I would sometimes get larger than life. I'd stand in the hallway and get as big as I can so that people knew, hey, she's really a nice person, but look at her demeanor right now. Something's wrong. We need to help. And that when I really did speak up or get loud or get bigger, they knew that there was a reason, that I wasn't just a bully all the time. There was definitely a reason for them to pay attention to me. So I think that actually needs to be thought of ahead of time. Yeah, I first started in terrestrial radio with a show called Speak Up and Stay Alive, which was all about patient safety. And that was on terrestrial radio stations. And the more I was interviewing physicians, healthcare people, patients, everybody had a story. And I found that many people had written books. And one day I just thought, maybe I need to help and use my radio show to help leverage getting the word out about their books. And so that was kind of the spinoff from Speak Up and Stay Alive to the sister station, Speak Up Talk Radio, where I pulled out the healthcare aspect of it and just went straight to the authors, regardless of their genre or their topic. So that's how that came about. And then I decided to combine it with the Pillowcase Project, because after my mom got out of the hospital, she was pretty incapable of doing much on her own. So she was an excellent seamstress, and she was just passing the time by making pillowcases. So every time I went to her house, which was every day, she'd have 4, 5, 10 pillowcases. And I said, Mom, what are we going to do with all of these? So we contacted Soldiers Angels at that point in time and asked if they had any need for some fun, colorful pillowcases. And they just loved the idea. So we went forward and used military fabric and was making pillowcases, sending them to the Soldiers Angels. They were forwarding on to the troops in Afghanistan and Iraq and ships in the Persian Gulf and homeless veteran shelters, until maybe about 4 years into that, they decided they wanted to do their own pillowcase project. So I helped them build that. And that's when we then segued into women in children's domestic abuse shelters, homeless shelters. And she passed away in 2016, but I thought, I'm going to continue this just on her behalf, kind of as a legacy, a tribute to her. So that's why I decided to combine that with Speak Up Talk Radio and the author interviews and Firebird Book Awards and the podcast awards. And that way, everybody can kind of take part in that. It was a win-win. It wasn't just a submission fee to enter your book or an author interview. It's actually a gift to someone who we will never know where it goes. I think just to realize that you are here for a reason. We're on this earth for a reason. And if you feel afraid, but if you could impact one other person, perhaps that's your reason for being here. So if you didn't speak up, where would that other person be? So it's almost a gift that we each have. Let's dig deep, find that, and be brave enough to, dip that toe in there and put it out there. And once you do, it almost becomes addictive.
In Business Boost today, I wanted to address some medical gaslighting, because this can happen at work, this can happen personally, professionally, the whole lot. It's just worth talking about, especially since you can go through so many difficult experiences, and sometimes it can be luck that you get a resolution that you need at the end of it. Now, just to give you a little bit of insight, watch and wait. Watch and wait is actually a thing. So if you go in and you have these tests and so on, people may say to you, well, your option can be watch and wait. That doesn't mean people are not going to do anything about it. It just means that they don't want to do anything that may be perhaps too deep an intervention when it's unnecessary. Just be mindful that that is a thing, but also be mindful of the following. You are always allowed a second opinion. It is no longer within COVID anymore, so you can bring somebody in with you to that appointment. And that is something I would actually strongly recommend, because when you are going through something that's very, very taxing emotionally and mentally, it's helpful for somebody else to be able to ask the questions, to be able to take the notes, and so on. Also, if you don't understand something, please always ask. And as I say, keep those notes. This is exactly the same as our guest has said as well. Other tips may be keeping a record of symptoms, keeping a record of photographs of symptoms even. If you have test results from different visits, if you have test results from independent tests, that can be helpful as well. Don't be afraid to keep evidence. As I said, when it comes to asking someone you trust before you go in, perhaps discuss with them the important things that you want to achieve during that consultation, the things that you want them to look out for, and the things that you want them to ask in case you forget. Because when you're in that emotional situation, it can be very difficult to remember, I need to say something. Within that consultation itself, these are some tips I would actually suggest when it comes to asking questions. If somebody says that there has been research and that's what these drugs are being recommended from, ask, what is that research based on? Who is that research based on? Is that research relevant to me? Those questions can be very important. How do you interpret test results? Because often doctors will give you all kinds of acronyms and numbers and you may not understand them. So actually ask, how do I interpret that? Another great question is, what have you recommended to other patients in my position? And this is not necessarily even just medically. This can be financially too. Financial toxicity is a thing, and this is where the cost of treatment, and that means things like missing work because you have to attend appointments and so on, can be even more toxic than actually not being treated at all. Also ask, what other options are there? Don't be afraid of saying that. They may not be palatable options. They may not be options you want to entertain, but ask. And then also, is there someone I could see who is a specialist in this area? Another important question, because general practitioners are as they are, general practitioners. They may not specialize in certain areas. They might, and if they are, great, if they're a specialist in the area you need, but otherwise do ask those questions. And one of my favorite questions actually is to ask somebody, well, why do you think that? If they're trying to explain something, why do you think that? Get an even deeper explanation. And it's worth remembering you have a legal right to have a copy of your test results and your medical records. Following that consultation, keep a record of the meeting. Ask for a second opinion if you want one or if you're worried. Before you leave, you can ask your practice to refer you to another doctor. We don't always remember that, we don't always know that, but you can. And if it's a consultant, then call and ask your GP if they will refer you to a different consultant. You can do that too. And then following your second opinion, make an appointment with the first consultant and then discuss those results. There are things that you can do, but also continue to document your symptoms. Now, I'm not saying this will stop all problems. Clearly, there are fractures in the system. However, if you keep your own notes, if in the event it has to go to court, at least you are prepared. And it also means you don't then have to go through all of that evidence and that trauma again, especially at a time when you really don't need the extra pressure. So largely keep notes, be aware, and hold that responsibility that you have for your own health very, very dear.
Hi, I'm Amy Joy, and I'm the host of Get Your Together Live with Amy Joy. And you can catch me every Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific on the amazing Trajectory channel right here on E360 TV.
Welcome back again to Mental Health Matters. Now we are going to our lived experience guest part of the show. And today we have Adrian Wilson with us, and he will be sharing his experiences with a drug he was prescribed called Ropinirole and talk about his experiences with the NHS. Let's go over to the studio.
We've got Adrian with us today, who's going to share his story about the NHS. Can you share your story with us?
Yes, I'm going to take you back really. It's an 8-year story really, is where it all started, but I'm going to take you a couple of years before that because I had an issue because I've had MS now for 29 years and I was having problems sleeping and I thought I need to see my GP about this, and I went to see him and he said, when I described what my symptoms were, said, oh, that sounds like something called restless leg syndrome. And I'd never heard of it, and it's a symptom where you feel when you lay down, sometimes when you're sitting down, it's almost like an experience of having a feeling of ants crawling up your legs, and then you find that your legs just suddenly will kick out, or like a spasm will happen from it. So I discussed that with him, and he said, there is a drug now we can put you on for that, and it's called Ropinirole. And he said, well, what we're going to do, we're going to put you on a low dosage for it, and we'll keep that monitored. And so basically between 2013 and 2015, it went all the way from having a low dosage to start with and then going up to the highest dosage, which from starting at 1 milligram, then going up to a 4 milligram over those 2 years. But it still wasn't helping, unfortunately. And I was sort of getting a bit desperate, and then to find out, where do we go from here? And then I went back to see the GP again and said, look, is there anything else that we could do? And through discussing it with him again, he said, we're going to stop it now. And it was stopped for a 2-week period. And my understanding was that it's just to get whatever was already in my system out of my system. And he said, I'm going to put you on a different dose. And he did so. And it started to work. So I thought, all right, maybe this is the miracle I've been waiting for. And it carried on, and I was feeling fine from it. And then going on a few months, because that was September 2015, that was. And then we've gone now to about March 2016 now. And I remember sitting at home with my wife, and I was just reading something on the internet, and I just suddenly clicked on an advert in a web page, which is most unlike me to have done. And it was describing all the facts about, is the lottery everything? There are other ways that you can actually, win money these days. The lottery is not the guarantee be all. So I read the story about it, and it said, apart from using the lottery, there are what's called gambling sites, and they might be a better option for you. And I read the article, and I didn't think any more about it. And unbeknown to me, well, when it actually happened, I suddenly found myself one day suddenly going onto the web and finding myself on a gambling site and signing up for a company, and I started putting small amounts of money onto the gambling site and started gambling, and I started to win, and there's a sudden feeling of, I've done well here, I've won something, and then I'd do it again, and I won a bit more, and I'd do that for a little while, and then suddenly I realised, oh, all the money that I've put on there's gone now. I've had to put some more money on there, and all of a sudden I'm into this sort of, how can I describe it? Like this cycle of having to keep doing this, but I didn't know why. I didn't know why I kept going with it, and it didn't actually make any sense. But I kept winning, I kept losing, and then I'd win again. And the more I kept doing it, and this is carrying on, and my wife didn't know anything about it at all. And I couldn't work it out how I couldn't seem to stop. And the longer it went on for, I started putting more and more and more. And it got to the stage where I found in myself, I as a person was changing. My mental state was changing, my behaviour was changing, and I suddenly discovered that I had turned into what I would class as a Jekyll and Hyde character.
Wow, gosh.
So whereas 1 minute I was being, in a normal life, being a husband, a father, going to work, doing all the normal things that we do, but then all of a sudden you sort of click your fingers, and I just totally reverted to this strange character. And the story of Jekyll and Hyde, Hyde was the evil side of Dr. Jekyll, and that was the person that I was feeling that I was becoming. And more it went on, and I found myself, while I was at work, because I worked in an office, but it was just me on my own. But when nobody was looking, I'd be gambling on my phone again. I'll be doing that. I'll do my work, then I go back to my phone again, and I'll just carry on. And I had a window on the door, and I was always conscious of anybody watching me, and I started becoming so secretive, so cautious of everything that was going on. Nobody's going to catch me doing this. And in the end, it got to the stage where I was gambling on different gambling sites. I was just signing up to them, and I don't even realise or remember doing any of this. And at one stage I ended up gambling up to £250 a time at the most on one gambling site, and kept that going to the stage where all the money was suddenly starting to go, and I couldn't work out why it had got this way. And it got to that stage where I remember one day my wife saying to me, look, be honest, all our savings are gone. I went back to see this GP that prescribed this drug, and I told him, what had happened, because it was a review of my Ropinirole tablets about what was helping my restless leg syndrome. And then I just came out to him, I need to talk to you. I said, I've got a bit of a gambling problem. And I remember him saying to me, well, what is it we're talking? Have you lost what, £1,000? I said, no. I said, a couple of thousand? I said, no. And he said, well, how much? And I said, £50,000.
I'm just struggling to relate this to the NHS, though, a little bit.
Right, this is what I'm coming on to next. So the drug that I was on, when I was put on it in 2013 and 2015, I was only ever told about the side effects. I was never told about the very rare side effects of this drug that you get. And there was actually 3 rare side effects you could get from this. One was hypersexuality, one was binge eating, and the other was suffering a gambling addiction.
Oh, I see.
Wow.
And from this, it suddenly became apparent that maybe this is not me doing this. something else is controlling me. I mean, I certainly remember calling my wife into the room, and I was still a wreck, because of this. I suddenly knew that this wasn't me doing this.
But obviously your GP then became aware of the link between what had happened to you and the drug.
Yeah.
Was that examined? Was there a resolution made? What was the outcome of that kind of revelation?
The consultant that I saw first at the hospital, he said, "Well, we need to get you off this drug because he's with it."
Yeah, sure.
And within 2 weeks of taking me off the drug, the desire to gamble had all gone.
Wow.
My
Totally
goodness.
just
That's incredible.
all gone. I had nothing at all. I didn't want to do anything. It was frightening me more to think about the word gambling and what it was involved. So anyway, I trawled the internet, the history of it, and I found an article, and it was about a firm of solicitors who had experience of many cases, not just to do with this, but lots of different things. So I got in touch with them. They couldn't help on that occasion, but the solicitor I spoke to said, "I do know somebody who's been through similar cases with other people. I think they'll be able to help you." So I got in touch with this other solicitor company, and long story short, it took a period of 7 years to resolve this with the solicitors. I mean, I had how many appointments I had to have. I had psychiatric assessments, how many psychological assessments. I'd have independent doctors give report, independent MS consultants, and the time, and things just kept going on and on and on. And just when you thought you're getting somewhere, 2 steps forward, 1 step backward again, because the NHS was challenging this. They challenged the fact about, they didn't believe about the GP had not discussed about the rest side effects. That's what they said. They denied that, side of it. But when I got the first independent medical report through from an independent doctor, and it was a draft form, and I read it all through, and I said, "Okay, I can see that one, I can see that point there." And then the next one I looked at, I said, "Right, the maximum dosage of this should be 4 milligram, but your GP has prescribed 2 times 3 milligram. Now, put a simple maths together, 2 times 3 is 6. It's not 4.
Yes.
And basically, I had been on that drug every day for 15 months,
Twice a
2
day.
milligrams, 2 months.
Yeah. Welcome back to the last part of the show. It's where we reflect and think about what we've taken away. And that was a very moving, emotional and powerful account of the experiences within this system.
Yes, the medical system, the banking system.
The big systems out there who seem to control a lot of what we do.
Yeah, they do. It was very powerful.
Yeah.
And very raw, actually.
Yes.
A lot of things to take away because there was an awful lot there. I think one of the main things is trust your instinct and don't give up. And I wish I'd a couple of things I've been through, I wish I'd had that knowledge to actually disagree or at least challenge GPs before. I was put on medication for something which I never believed I had this condition, and then 15 years later they said, "Oh no, we don't ever think you had it." So I'd taken all this medication, not needed, and leaves you with side effects which are ongoing. And it's
This is the problem.
Yeah.
It leaves the side effects
Yes.
because you are actually taking something which changes your constitution.
yes, and which you don't need and never needed in the first place. So and my gut was that I never had this condition anyway, but I'm not a doctor, so of course I'm going to listen to my doctors. So that, I think that's one thing is just really just keep at it, dog with a bone. And Adrian did share with us that his tenacity to kind of get to the other side and get a resolution was thankfully positive, and you know, he did receive compensation, etc. So that's good. So always stick with it. It must have been exhausting to follow that through for all those years, but it's worth it in the end.
Yeah,
I think they're my 2 takeaways.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you. And I think the sad part for me there is exactly what you said, and it's what Adrian reiterated. We do tend to believe the doctor. And I'm not saying don't. We have amazing doctors on this show. But I am really backing up what you're saying. If it doesn't sit well with you, challenge it. Ask the questions and get a second opinion. Never be afraid of getting a second opinion. Yeah. Because one of the key things that comes out of this a lot of the time is GPs are not going to be experts in every single area, and they can't be.
No, that's true.
And now, with the time factors that you've got since the pandemic, where everybody is so overwhelmed, overworked and so on, you may not get the full answer that you need. So we have to, I guess, take that and go and ask for more, even though it feels awkward.
It does. Asking for a second opinion must be really hard to do, but I think really important, like you say.
Yeah. We are always grateful for people who are willing to share their experiences, because if this resonated with you, hopefully you know that things can be done. You know that hopefully there are some ways of getting things resolved, and also the importance of just keeping those documents, because if you ever need to rely on them, they will be important for you in the future. Thank you, as always, for tuning in, and have a healthy week.